the biggest piece of gold you can own is like, that email, name, phone number. Like that's huge. And the more information and the more of those data walls you can use. So I'm starting to educate, some of my clients, and then, just speaking and talking about like, you can't build on someone else's land. And
welcome to the B2B Digital Marketer Podcast, a podcast helping you to end your struggle with digital marketing, helping you to pave a new and better path to target and capture your ideal customer. Each week, we teach you how insiders and experts debunk the dreary and become engines of innovation. Now, here's your host, Jim Rembach.
Okay, B2B DM gang. Today I'm excited because we're going to talk about something that for me, from a risk and a threat and a worry perspective, oftentimes crosses my mind. And that is, have we gotten to the point where some of us have built our business on borrowed land? And what does that mean? And how do we, really become less exposed to the risks that currently exist and is continuing to grow on the internet today, as far as our online businesses? And it's not just a B2C thing that should be worried about. It's also a B2B thing. And we're going to talk about that because we have Anna Raynes on the show with us today. Anna, welcome.
hi, thank you. Thank you for having me.
So you and I have had a great discussion, at least I think so, before we started hitting record. So if you can talk a little bit about it and give us some context around what you mean by building our business on borrowed land.
I have just noticed, just being in different marketing groups and working with different entrepreneurs, there's this whole other side of entrepreneurs that have really built their businesses through mostly Facebook and Facebook groups, which has been effective for, I would say, the last like 8 years, right? Having that Facebook group, generating leads from it, selling. But what's happened is that it's almost like email became the direct mail of digital media. Like people were like, oh, we don't do that. That's like not our thing. We don't focus on our site. Like we have a one-page site or no website at all. Like everything, like and Facebook was producing these crazy numbers. And, with the iOS changes, I mean, some of these people have literally gone out of business within months, who were generating really good income. Like I see in forums and in groups that I'm in where people are like, I have no engagement in my Facebook group anymore. I can't get people to convert, like all of these things. And they're just, hitting the panic button, really. And I talked to them about like, well, what about your website? They're like, oh, I don't need a website. I'm like, yeah, that's the only thing. That's like, that's home base. That's what you own. Like, and those emails, especially going into next year with, cookies becoming so important, to like, that's all you will have for retargeting, eventually like that is gold. Email has always been gold. I mean, as far back as, anyone can remember. And I think anyone who has been doing marketing for a long time would say like, the biggest piece of gold you can own is like, that email, name, phone number. Like that's huge. And the more information and the more of those data walls you can use. So I'm starting to educate, some of my clients, and then, just speaking and talking about like, you can't build on someone else's land. And I think that's like from old school, even like, I think I heard that, oh my gosh, probably like in 2012. And we were talking about you speaking with Mari Smith. And I think it was from her or someone in that like circle, that was like, oh, don't do that. And this was even when, I totally remember this. And I say this to people, when Facebook made that shift from being completely organic and free to being, people are like, oh, they're becoming like evil Google. Now you have to, pay to play. And one of the things that like the marketers or the influencers at the time were saying, they're like, you can't build on rented land. You can't build on someone else's land. Like, yes, of course they could do that because that's their platform. So you have to bring them over to your platform and have them convert and nurture them and speak to them there. And somehow, I don't know, digital just got out of like everybody was doing it, right? And that message was lost, sort of. So yeah, I find it really interesting, and it's going to happen, obviously, right? There's just going to be changes. So.
Well, and as you're talking, I think, and I want to make sure that we're kind of level setting here, is that's a lot of the B2C side, is using those particular methods, and B2B, to some degree, there may has been some leveraging of Facebook.
No, I would think a lot of, so like coaches that work with businesses, I think there's a lot of B2B within the Facebook group. So B2C, yes, outside of the groups, but within the groups, I mean, people have gone away from the LinkedIn groups that were working really well, maybe 6-7 years ago, and moved them into Facebook groups and created this B2B relationship. So that's why I was particularly focused on the Facebook groups, and then they would drive ads into those groups. But it's 100% B2B. I would say 90% of my clients are all B2B. So,
really? Yeah. Well, and that's very helpful. I mean, so if I start thinking about with just the platforms in general, so I mean, you talked about the Facebook's example, but we also, can look at LinkedIn, because I mean, depending on the type, if you start getting away from, I should say, if you start getting away from some of the smaller, coaches and consultancies, and you get into some that are a little bit larger, they're not spending as much time on the Facebook. They're trying to, and have built websites, and they're trying, to make sure that they actually have the captured audience. They have maybe even been doing some email, but goodness knows, I mean, email lists in the B2B world with all the COVID changes, and, people no longer with the companies they were. And, also the whole buyer's journey now having, more people in it. When you start thinking about account-based management strategies, I mean, it's just getting significantly more complex. So if I would like to start thinking, what should I be doing, or what should I do? Because the noise is also increased as well, right? So everybody in, well, let's just say the world period, regardless of B2B, B2C, or B2B2C, or, people will say, well, it's all P2P, right? Okay. People to, well, okay, fine. But the thing is, everybody is now trying to generate more leads, get more attention. And it's like, okay, how do we kind of, and you even said this, old is new again. How do we kind of like look at all these things contextually from a strategy perspective, and make sure that we're making the right decisions and heading in the right directions?
Yeah, I mean, I really think you have to, like you said, as P2P, really, like how are we, I think it's really looking and niching down. I work with HubSpot, not on everything, but I am a HubSpot partner, and I took this training with Dan Tyre, who's like one of the first salespeople there. And he always said, like, his thing is like, the riches are in the niches, So I love that, because I think we really have to become not niche down so much, because I've seen that really turn to, for anyone who is like an only Facebook agency, I'm like, probably not doing, they're definitely having some headaches right now. But just like almost get to a systematic way where you can really understand, your few personas that, and really get into it. I feel like the marketing agency is becoming more marketing and sales, even with my bigger clients, even with like the cyber security clients, the medical parts clients, the hydraulic parts, like real niche B2B stuff. It's like going through, like you said, account-based marketing, like going through the whole cycle, working with their sales team, working with the CEO, working like in the different departments. And I think an understanding of that, and really, being open to being more of a partner, like than just like, oh, we come in and we do your marketing, but you're like really invested in, the bottom line of that company, is really important. So then what you do is you're like, okay, well, who else is like this, right? So I have this cybersecurity company, and they're sort of like this hydraulics company. Yes, they do something very different, but the way they run their business, how many people are in it, just their values, all of those things are very similar. So then I can apply the same concepts, as opposed to, maybe going to, I don't know, something different that runs maybe more like a B2C. Then that starts to get complicated, because you can't apply those same learnings. And then instead of providing value to those people here, you're really starting all over with your systems. I think it's, in my later days learning, it's all about systems, right? And like having, I hope that answers your question.
Well, I mean, partly, yes, to a degree. The other thing is just the whole, being inundated. Let me give you, maybe I can give you an example. You have a new platform come out like Clubhouse, right? And so for me, I started looking at that. I'm like, oh, omni-channel marketing, I need to get on that. And I started going down the path of, setting everything up in Clubhouse. I even, did some other things to help clients to get on Clubhouse. And I'm primarily B2B. I mean, I don't do much B2C, hardly these days anymore, because I've niched down. but I'm like, and I started running down this path and hurrying. I'm like, oh, we got to do something. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Is this just yet another platform that isn't going to translate, into, the returns that we needed to translate. And then also, may end up getting squashed, because Twitter turns on their, audio capabilities, Facebook turns in there. And I said, well, wait a minute. And so we ended up, abandoning our Clubhouse activities, because again, we're B2B, and started looking at all these other factors. And I had to evaluate how many times do you keep going down this particular path because it's a brand new platform that somebody else owns, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. I always think the question, and a lot of my team, they do or don't remember, depending on how old they are. We tend to have a younger team, so they don't, but I do remember Meerkat. And I'm like, is this a Meerkat situation? Because I swear that was in and out in like 2 weeks. Do you remember Meerkat?
No, I don't.
You don't remember? How come nobody remembers Meerkat? Oh my gosh. Then it was like that weird, it was like a honey badger was the logo. It was the weirdest thing. It was so weird. It was like Periscope. It was Meerkat, then Periscope. And then, then like live video became a thing, but like everybody was doing Meerkat. I swear it was popular. Like everybody and their mother was doing it for like a month. Which is kind of how I feel about Clubhouse. I find it a little weird. I don't know if people still use it. I don't use it.
Well, I think, I don't know what their growth numbers are right now, but, last fall, because of, COVID, being more intense from a lockdown perspective they were just blowing it out the water with people jumping on the platform. I don't know what it is now, but I think you hit on, and where I was going with this particular point. I'm sitting here, I'm a B2B digital marketer. I have all these things in front of us. Heck, TikTok, do I need to be on there? I mean, where do I need to allocate time and effort and resources? Because here's what I have absolutely solidified as an issue is, and I think you kind of hit on it to some degree, where someone's like, well, what's the website? So people may know the website. I know I need to grow my company. I know I need to generate leads. I know I need to, convert those leads into sales. And I can get all and understand all that. But I think, the whole online marketing thing has gotten so darn complex, and it can no longer, be the situation where, oh, Mary takes care of that part-time. Those days are over.
Yeah.
I mean, where do I focus my attention, and how do I put things in proper order, and, make sure that my strategy, is going to be the most effective for me? I think there's some alignment things that have to take place, right?
I think, if you can take some of the content you're already creating, duplicate it into a channel that's new for you. I just had this conversation literally with a client, and it was actually about TikTok. And he was like, I help businesses increase their revenue. Like, he's B2B, and he helps them increase their revenue. He has a whole system, and how to high ticket sales, all this stuff. And he was just like, why TikTok doesn't make sense to me, but I have seen growth there. So what we're doing, because he's already doing YouTube and it's doing well, is like, let's just take some of those videos, throw them out there, give it 30 days. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't, same. So I think, and a lot of what we're doing is repurposing tons of the content, right? And then using it on the site, using it on LinkedIn. So I feel like if you can repurpose, that's where I had trouble with Clubhouse. it was really hard to repurpose. You had to be live. Like it was just and I think that's why it's honestly not succeeding, because it's so much heavy lifting for business owners. And yeah, I mean, if you're B2B, like whether you're the agency or the business owner or the business you're doing business with, it's a lot of heavy lifting to be like, oh, at 3:00. And I remember I would get the alerts like 4:00. Oh, there's this women's blah, blah, blah that you're invited to if you want to speak at. And I'm like, I have like 5 other meetings. I gotta pick up my daughter from school. Like, it's just like, it's when it does that. Right. And I feel like that was the thing with, plus Meerkat was like the first live video thing. But again, at the time, and I think audio, I love podcasts. I love audio. So I feel like Clubhouse has opened up a door that will probably turn into something else in the future, which is interesting. But to me, we test where we don't have to, where we don't have to go look for a Mary who does it part-time, probably not very well. And then we don't really know if the stats are even accurate, right? So.
Definitely. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's very helpful. You and I have also talked about, and we kind of hit on this a little bit, and maybe we can spend a little more time on it, SEO and search engine optimization, and, the whole cookie thing that you were talking about, for those who, aren't aware. I think that's just yet another iteration in the next evolution of the platforms getting more revenue for their platforms, right? Hey, you want to retarget people? Pay me, right? Sure, you can retarget.
Oh yeah. And then you talk about complications. Target's getting into it. Walmart's getting into it. Walgreens. Now they have all introduced ad networks because they have, so much first party data. So they're like, oh, you want to reach those people? And, you can't reach them here, there because of third party data. Now you can buy the ad space from us because we have it. It's, it's our data to use however we want. So it's going to be interesting.
So I think the phrase that I had mentioned that I keep hearing is wild, wild west, and how, we thought we were in it, and I don't know if we're there yet.
Yeah. It's like the Europeans discovering America, right? You're like, wait, I thought we knew, like we had it all figured out. And like, here's this like whole other like North America, like what just happened? I don't know.
Well, yeah, that's a good example, because then you said, okay, well, we hit the Caribbean first, and then we hit Plymouth Rock, and then we hit, and there's this whole westward thing.
There's a whole, yeah. And you're like, wait, what? Like, I thought we were civilized. What? Like, where's that flat? Like, oh my God, there's so much. And from a B2B perspective, I mean, think about like I'm saying, like some of, I'm trying to think of one of my clients. I can't think of a really great example. Well, our medical parts client, they do some shelving units that we were starting to introduce to Amazon, but something like a Home Depot, right, would be somewhere where we may or may not want to explore for display ads, because people who are, going back to people, right, that's maybe somewhere that even if they're going to buy in bulk or whole, wholesale, that could be something that we would maybe look into that ad network. And then Amazon, it's its own whatever. And I'm sure they're going to have a huge B2B presence. So I don't know. I feel like it's almost like melting. Like there's not there, like where there used to be such a clear definition between like B2B and B2C. And I think that's why you're hearing so much more P2P, because you just kind of have to be present in people's minds, still a person making that buying decision.
Well, I think that's what you just said is everybody is just trying to vie for that. Is that, okay, yeah. How do I remain top of mind? Because, we all know that a lot of it comes down to a whole timing scenario, right?
Yeah.
I may need that, but I don't necessarily need that right now because I have these 2 other competing, priorities, and, but, I'll get to that later. And then we want to make sure that when they do, we're there. So, it's, that's, I think the ultimate dilemma, especially in the B2B world, is doing that from a relationship, ongoing building, trust building, everybody competing with all the noise that exists in their personal and professional life, everything. I mean, there's no simple answer here. And I think for me, what it has warranted, and is probably more important than it's ever been before, is us to do the strategy work to a greater degree before we attempt any execution work.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
So in that vein, what do you find you doing, with your clients from a strategy perspective that, maybe you weren't doing before that has now become essentially vital?
I think we're zooming out more, right? Instead of zooming in, zooming out, right? What's the big picture? Why are we doing this? Like really zooming out and looking at, you know, all of it, like getting involved with like, well, what's the sales process? What does that look like? What are your values? Where are we going? Things like that, like bigger conversations, almost where I come from a bigger agency background. And those are the conversations that a lot of times we were having. And with the smaller, and not so small, $5-10 million businesses, but still considered a small business. Just having those conversations, like what is it that, like, let's zoom out together and like, let's look at the whole operation, right? We're not just looking at like, how are we going to create that campaign, but how does that campaign fit into all of it, into your sales process, into, and who are the people? The other thing that I started to do, and honestly, I just started to do this like super recent, and it came from a pain point that we experienced, is understanding the personalities of everyone we're working with and really figuring out how to best work with everybody, right? Because that comes into it again, P2P, but that has so much to do with it, where before we just got involved with, some of the marketing people and we were delivering on campaigns. It's like, well, because what happens is the marketing team takes it back to the sales team, or they take it back to production, or they take it back to, and then there's all these other people making decisions that you don't have a touch point with. So we've kind of zooming out, and we're like, can we bring those people into the room? Like, let's start to know them and what are their personalities and what are their pain points and what's, and like really having a holistic strategy. And that's been working better because, all these other people who have a voice into what's happening and they're feeling that pressure, right? People are like, okay, there's so much noise. And because there's so much noise, the CEOs and the decision makers are like, well, why don't I ask that guy in production? Why don't I ask the sales guy? And then I'm like, okay. And they're like, well, sales said this and production said that. It's like, okay, so let's all get into the room, because it's really complicated when, it's like a telephone.
Well, that's interesting that you say that, because for me, but my interpretation is, I'm coming from a world that is focused in on customer experience and customer centricity, is that, everybody in the organization is involved with, being able to acquire and grow the company and acquire more customers. And then therefore taking it to the next level is retaining them. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a couple different components. I mean, people used to say, hey, retain customers, because that's the most important part of your business. And then people would say, hey, you need to acquire new customers. And the fact is you have to do both, right?
Both, yeah.
I mean, you can sustain your organization and keep your base solid by retaining customers, but you grow your business by, going out and acquiring, new ones. Yes, you're going to have some growth. You're going to have some referrals within your existing client base, but ultimately, growth comes from your ability to generate more leads and close and get more clients.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So I think from that perspective, you talking about that zooming out piece makes total sense to me, because now we have the three components coming together. I have the whole client success, the client and the customer sat, and the whole client, customer servicing piece, and being able to support all of that, into my ability to, grow the business. So then talk about, if you're going through and you're doing more of that zooming out, how has it changed the execution?
Honestly, it forces the execution to be a little bit more organized, a lot of it more organized, right? Because there's just so many more parts, so many more people. So in order for everybody to be on the same page, the organization becomes more critical. Which then you introduce other platforms, right? Like now we're looking at like Airtable, which we weren't using before, and things like that. But whatever. It doesn't matter. It's not about a platform. It's about like being organized and making sure that everybody is, understands what the big picture is.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, so if I'm sitting here and I'm a B2B digital marketer and I'm putting all this effort and investment into what I'm doing now, what should I really stop and think and pause about? and really, maybe do some reallocation of time and resources. I should pull from here and put into here in order to make a better difference?
I honestly, one of the things that has made the biggest difference is understanding the sales process to me. But I like numbers and I like data. So I like, there's no win for me. Well, there is, but there isn't, right? Let's take the medical parts, for example. I'll talk to you about the process. So we drive leads, right? We've driven really great leads, mostly through Google because it's so nichey that, it's just outperformed. It's done really well. And then the leads go into HubSpot, but from there, the leads get picked up and zapped into Zoho. Then the salespeople, there's probably 1 to 2 people in every state, right? They're a pretty big company. And it gets picked up in Zoho. And then that person has to follow up with the hospitals, start their relationship, whatever. We could end it at the HubSpot. We can end it at the sign off. But what I do is I ask them for access to Zoho. And then I look and see, who are the salespeople that are actually picking up. And we do this as a team. Like I know within that company who's selling, who's not selling, who's slacking, who takes a while to follow up, and it's more like, I guess, account-based marketing. But to me, that's important because at the end of the day, the ROI is not dependent just on me passing off the sales and what the sales came in, but if I have to give it out to another human being who then has their personality and the way that they behave. So I'm able to bring that report back to the client and say hey, these 10 leads have been sitting with the salesperson for about 2 weeks and they haven't been followed up on. I mean, the client loves that. No, they're like, are you kidding me? But, and then I follow up and I look at it and I look at oh, these are the hospitals and this is what's working in these areas. And so just kind of following the whole flow and really being bought into, I think you kind of become, you really do, for me anyway, in my experience with my clients, become very involved with the business and you're almost like a business manager, not manager, but I mean, you just have to be involved. At the end of the day, they make money, you make money. That's what I tell my team all the time. So. Well,
I think that's very interesting and very insightful in a lot of different ways, especially when you start talking about that oftentimes conflict that exists between sales and marketing, right? Hey, you're giving us terrible leads, marketing people. Well, you're not following up on anything, sales. It's wait a minute. So, and that's important because it is, as you stated, it's a system. And we have to look for opportunities that exists to repair the system or improve the system, or make sure that we're working the system.
Yeah. There's actually a really good book. Oh my gosh. It's British. So a lot of people don't read it here, but I have a agency partner in the UK. I think it's called Simple, Scalable, Repeatable. And it's this woman who went from flipping burgers in McDonald's to running all of the European franchises. And she talks about systems. It's such a good book. Really, really good. I forget her name, but anyways, it's really, really good. I would recommend it for anyone who's interested in systems.
No, it's very helpful. And thank you for sharing. Okay. So now let's take off the blinders. Let's move away the barriers. I mean, I've got unlimited budget. I can do whatever the heck I want. Right. So if I had that opportunity as it would exist in today's world, what would you recommend people do with it?
Unlimited budget. From a B2B perspective,
yep.
You know what, for us, geo-targeting works really well. And that could be, with display ads and stuff, that could be a little bit expensive. You know what, high production video, that's where I would put a lot of, really high production. I think things are going to move to high production. I'm seeing that a lot. I'm seeing high production is working way better than low budget. So I would invest in video and really going out with video, display, YouTube, your emails, everything, lots of video. And I would invest in having a production company put together, a series of even webinars, right? Years ago, I used to work with a company when I was still working at a corporate agency, and they competed with PayPal. So, and their webinars was their number one leading lead gen, and it was all high production video. So I really think that that would be a huge investment.
That would be a huge investment. I mean, high-end production video is, you're talking a significant, investment.
Yeah, we have unlimited budget.
Yeah, we have unlimited budget. Okay, good. Thank you for sharing. I'll tell you, Anna Raynes, I've had a great time chatting with you today. How does the B2B DM gang get in touch with you?
Yeah, Simplified Impact is the best place to find, what we're doing, what we're up to. We have a couple new fun programs, things like that. But yeah, simplifiedimpact.com is the best way. And I mean, if they wanted to reach me directly, a.raynes@simplifiedimpact.com, but that would be the best place.
Anna Raynes, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and we wish you the very best.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Go now to join the B2B DM gang in the B2B Marketer LinkedIn group, where you can connect with other B2B DM disruptors and get access to our B2B DM cheat sheets, checklist, and guides. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, please help by going to iTunes to rate, review, and subscribe. And share the show on all of your digital platforms. Be sure to tune in next week for our next episode. And always remember, you can automate your lead capture, but you must lure your lead.